Welcome to the Center Mid Philosopher. This episode is brought to you by Augustus Royale Fashion. Life's not black and white, it's gray, and gray is beautiful. Check out the brand below in the link. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of the Center Mid Philosopher. We're going to be giving a bit of a love letter and a deep dive on the world of Italian soccer. And I should preface it with, back in the late 80s, early 90s is when I really fell in love with the game. The Serie A was top dog. They had all the world stars. And so that's really what made me fall in love with soccer. The World Cup was in Italy in 1990. And, the old days of AC Milan with, Ruud Gullit and Van Basten, Paolo Maldini, of course, Franco Baresi, Donadoni, list goes on and on and on. So I have a real affection for the Italian game. However, one of the great things about this show is if you can understand soccer, you can kind of understand the world. And it's a lens into microcosms of culture, and in doing that deep dive, we'll uncover some nastiness and some prejudice and even racism and things of that nature. And we're, by no means condoning that, nor are we condemning it. We're just telling it like it is. So that being said, I do want to preface that, hey, Italy, I spent a summer there in college with two of my best buddies, Will and Crenshaw. If you're watching, love you guys. And, I fell in love with the game. The women are beautiful. The men are the coolest of cool. So I have nothing but love for all that is Italy. But we're going to talk about the culture of Italian soccer. And to lead off, they have their own dialect and own vocabulary to describe the beautiful game there. Top of the order being, and again, I'll sidebar, pardon my southern accent and terrible pronunciation of all these Italian words, so just bear with me and be kind in your comments. And by the way, if you don't like this show, like it now, subscribe, and thank you to our sponsor, Augustus Royale Fashion, all of which is below. But top of the order is a word called catenaccio, which means door bolt, which is a way of describing the way the Italians play, which is extremely defensive. And it quite technically is they would have four in the back and a sweeper, which they called libero, which means free, which that person was basically meant to clean up anything that the guys didn't get man-to-man in the back four. It's sort of since been abandoned since, but the catenaccio style is still very much central to the core of Italian philosophy of soccer. And we're going to go a little bit deeper and talk about how the catenaccio style is actually a metaphor for Italian culture, really. So it really took form in the 60s, and it's, historians will argue whether it was Helonio Herrera from Inter Milan or Nereo Rocco from AC Milan that really pioneered it, but they really kind of both did. And as often is the case in Italian soccer, so much of it is born out of the Inter versus Milan rivalry. And interestingly enough, AC Milan is a very nationalist in its origins, heavily Italian, maybe a little bit more working class team, whereas Inter was birthed out of to be the opposite, which is, as apropos to its name, is very international. And so they had a lot of international stars, but Helonio Herrera at Inter really was one of the main pioneers of the catenaccio style. And, going on to this very day, and recently Silvio Berlusconi, who was the former prime minister of Italy and is sort of a Donald Trump-esque figure with the orange tan to boot, a former rail estate magnate and then media baron, sort of an Orwellian Citizen Kane type figure that he, was known for manipulating the media, and he was very nationalist, and he's very right wing, whereas Inter is very viewed to be sort of the bourgeois, upper class artist, poet, and sort of left communist socialist leaning even. So there's some political clashes there, but the catenaccio style is really a representation of the Italian culture. If you really want to go real deep with it, it's, a lot of people have linked it to, so Arrigo Sacchi, who is another famous Italian coach, links the catenaccio style all the way back to the Roman Empire, because Italy was one of the most invaded countries of all time, and Romans were always defending their land. So literally in its core fiber, Italians are defend. They're constantly they've been invaded almost as much as any country in the world. So in their very fiber of their being is to defend. Some have theorized that post World War II, Italians being a little bit more on the losing end of that they were malnourished. And they actually had to conserve their energy, so they didn't attack as much. It was much more sit back, wait for our opponents to make a mistake, and then we'll make a counterattack. It was literally theorized that it was linked to they just frankly weren't well fed enough to be attacking all the time.
That's hilarious. Not hilarious, but I make those like those little pieces from outside of the soccer world affecting the soccer world. I've always found interesting. Modern day, is that similar to like a Atletico Madrid, like kind of hit you on the counter? Sean Dyche, what would it be? His old Burnley teams. Like, is that kind of the style today, or is it something a little different?
You mean back then?
Yeah.
It's still people claim that it's kind of dead, but I still think it's very, very, very much alive. And it actually timely to do this show right in between the Inter and Milan Champions League semifinals. Inter dominated, but then they just sat back the entire game. They had possession like 20% of the time in the second half. So it's extremely alive and well today. But again, like with any culture, it is often linked by one or two key figures that have had such an imprint on the style of the game. And back in the 60s, it really was Inter and AC Milan were the dominant forces. So it was very much of that time, but I personally still think it is extremely alive and well. So, another interesting thing is some people have even gone so far back as to say that the catenaccio style can be linked to Machiavelli's The Prince, which was a very pragmatic way of governing, in that you make do with what you have. And if you gain power, you keep it. It's very, whereas, they say Plato and something like that is a little bit more hypothetical. This is catenaccio in Italian culture is very pragmatic. Make do with what you have. So, if I may add my own slant on this, is that I have noticed when I was in Italy, and again, we had an incredible time. It is perhaps one of the most heavily tourist countries in the world, and while your interactions with a lot of different Italians is very pleasant, on the whole, they can be very anti-tourist at times. So they're used to kind of saying, hey, this is our land, get out. And then, I would also add that, it's well known today that Italy is having a massive population decline because, over 30% of Italian men to this very day, over 30, still live with their parents. And 50% of Italian men between the ages of 25 and 35 still live with their parents. So it is literally a logistical issue that they are not super comfortable bringing their girlfriends home because they might run into their mom in the bathroom, which is uncomfortable. And it, also giving Italian men credit, the job prospects in Italy has been for a while, and it's very much to this day, is really difficult. So it's sort of set in a bit of a malaise with the culture that, they sort of value family loyalty over independence, which again, that's catenaccio. That's the style. That's sit back, play D, value defense, value family. And so that's a lens into the Italian culture, and why I feel like it's in their very fiber of their being to be super defensive. So next, we'll dive deep into rivalries in Italy, and within the clubs. Again, like any country in the world, there's socioeconomic divides, there's political divides, there's divides over religion, over race, over region. A lot of people know that the northern Italy, the Juventuses, the AC Milans of the world, Sampdoria, are very prejudiced to the south. Even Roma and Lazio, and certainly Napoli. So there's some massive components there. Top of the order, though, Inter versus AC Milan, what we just talked about, Derby della Madonnina, named after the Madonna statue on the top of the White Cathedral there. We've kind of uncovered there that's sort of the right wing versus the left wing. Then going right into Lazio versus Roma, which is probably the most heated rivalry in the nation, dubbed Derby della Capitale. So again, kind of uncovering some nasty stuff of the Italian history. So Lazio actually was spawned out of Mussolini's mind. He wanted a club that would rival Roma, and Roma's very much working class, of the people. They have the colors of the Vatican. Their logo is the wolf feeding Romulus and Remus, which is kind of a weird logo. But then Lazio is that of the eagle, which a lot of have linked to sort of a fascist image. And even to this very day, there's fascist undertones within the club. Paolo Di Canio, one of their most famous players, not that long ago, would score a goal and give a fascist signal to the fans, and even incredibly, Mussolini's great grandson plays for Lazio to this very day, which is just bonkers.
You told me that before we started today. I was like, what? I think like the average sports fan in America, I think they'd be surprised. I get what I'm trying to say. Can you imagine if there's like political influences on like NFL and NBA games?
Yeah.
Like that's just like a hard concept to kind of put your head around if you're not from that part of the world, or if you're not it's not on your radar. But it's clear it's kind of in the grains of the teams.
Yeah.
It is quite literally. It's a very interesting dynamic if you're not used to it.
All over the world, you'll in anywhere. I mean, Spain, certainly Russia, Ukraine, certainly Latin America. A lot of clubs have and dictators have used. Certainly Franco in Spain of Real Madrid. They have literally used their childhood affinity for soccer and their clubs to basically drum up support for their political campaigns. I mean, Berlusconi literally leveraged his ownership with AC Milan straight into a political rallying, and again led to a 3-term presidency there. And again, going deeper on the Lazio and Roma, the Lazio's in the Parioli, northern part of Rome, which is a little bit more middle and upper class, whereas the Roma is in the Sestaccio neighborhood, is a little bit more working class. And again, Mussolini actually tabbed General Vaccaro, his top general, to basically start Lazio, and it represents strength, power, and the ancient Roman legions.
You know what it is? It's like it's DeSantis in Florida using Inter Miami for his like next presidential.
That's exactly what that would be.
It's such a it's just not how we do it here. It's so interesting. It's
Well,
so interesting.
and again, it shows the power of soccer in the world. If you can capture the fandom of some of these teams, then you can use it to wield almost any power you want. And you know, it's wild. And so kind of jumping into a couple other rivalries in Italy, certainly Inter versus Juve, the Derby d'Italia. Also, I would mention that we'll talk about Juventus in a lot more depth here in a minute, but Juventus is like almost like the Duke of Italy. They basically have a rivalry with everyone. So I found another interesting one is Genoa versus Sampdoria, which is the Derby della Lanternia. So Mussolini also helped found Sampdoria, which was he didn't like that Genoa was from British origins, and so he's like, we got to have another club in that region that's not tied to the British. So he kind of brokered the merger between Andrea Doria and Samper, which means Sampdoria. So Sampdoria is by no means still so tied to Mussolini, but it's interesting nonetheless that that's another club that was basically spawned by a not so awesome dictator. Also, kind of one of the derbies of the South is Napoli versus Roma, Derby del Sol. It's a real Southern-based rivalry. Then you have the Derby del Sicilia, which is Palermo versus Catania, the two largest cities in Sicily, which is a really cool one. Then you got Juventus versus Torino, and Juventus, of course, is in Turin. Torino was started out of some former Juventus dissidents, so that's a very heated rivalry, albeit extremely one-sided. Juventus pretty much dominates that one, except for back in the day, Torino used to, fight a little bit. So next, it's impossible to talk about the culture of Italian football and Italian soccer without talking about corruption and scandal. Again, Italians, we love you, but it's and this is why we love the beautiful game there. It's like a soap opera. It's got it all. It's got bribing refs. It's got doping. It's got tax fraud. It's got, almost not a year goes by without some team being docked 10 points for some sort of infraction.
Juventus right now.
Yes. So thank you for bringing up Juventus. Again, Juventus, I love you. I'm a huge fan, and you could fill 10 novels on Juventus in general. You can't not talk about Italian soccer without talking about Juventus. By far the most winningest club in the history. They're owned by the Agnelli family, which is an old industrialist, multi-billionaire family that owns the Fiat Motor Company, amongst many other businesses. And the Agnellis are known to be the Kennedys of Italy. And, back in the day, they were smoking cigarettes and having cocktails with movie stars. And they have been known to do a lot of backdoor dealings with politicians in the tunes of $30, $40, $50 million a year to get what they want. And it's worth noting that the Italian government it literally used to be almost legal to bribe politicians. It was actually set up that way for a while. So, it's just in their core fiber of their being to bribe politicians and bribe referees. And it goes on till this very day. The most notable scandal in 2006 was Calciopoli, which was Fiorentina, AC Milan, Juventus, Regina, and possibly a few other clubs that were basically caught on wiretap bribing referees to slant to get wins. And there's actually even a website called antijuve.com that has all the different videos of all the different referees clearly calling PKs or not calling PKs, or so that Juventus can basically win the Scudetto, which is wild. And literally this year, Juventus was caught in some tax fraud, basically misrepresenting some of their transfers to basically not have to pay taxes on it, or misrepresenting some profits, and they were docked 10 points. So they were number one, and they are not anymore. So they're still at it to this very day, which is just really, really interesting. It's also worth noting that one of my favorite books of all time, and a lot of this podcast in general, and certainly today's episode, is influenced by Franklin Foer's How Soccer Explains the World, of which there's an entire chapter dedicated to corruption in Italy and in football and soccer. And it talks about a tale of two oligarchs, one oligarch being the Agnelli family, which is thought to be very much old money, and then AC Milan with Silvio Berlusconi, thought to be very much new money. Old money, Juventus kind of does it in the shadows, backdoor dealings with some class. AC Milan with Silvio Berlusconi, it was very overt out in the open, and he was kind of one of those, if you can't control the media, buy the media. So he sort of controlled his own narrative and did it a little bit more flashy. But interestingly enough, Juventus, in the shadows, might be perhaps the most corrupt of them all. How can we not talk about a little bit of corruption, not talking about Napoli? Again, love me some Napoli. Just won the Scudetto, first time in 33 years since Maradona. But, Maradona has never been better. That was his peak at Napoli, but it also kind of killed him, because there are countless photos of him partying, orgies on yachts, sex, drugs, and rock and roll with the Camorra family, which is the main mafia family of Naples. And, there's always been allegations of his team throwing games so that they could win millions of dollars. And, the mafia, especially in the South, was always there because of the perceived inability for government to take matters into their own control. So it's kind of a core fiber of their culture as well. Obviously not as much to this day. However, I would be remiss if I did not mention some of the mafia undertones and connections with teams. And, there's another great book called The Miracle of Castle di Sangro that talks about some of the teams of the lower divisions and how they're essentially pioneered and owned and ruled by mafia families, which is really, really interesting as well. Back to Juventus a little bit, their nickname is the Old Lady, for those that don't know that. So Juventus technically means youth. And so back in the 1930s, it became sort of a joke of their people that were not fans of Juve, that their team was getting older, so they called them old. And then the lady part came because a lot of the men referred to the club as a woman, like you would a boat. There's like, this is my girlfriend. And a lot of the wives would be like, he's more in love with that club than he is with me, so they called it the other lady. So it became the Old Lady, and the name stuck. So that's Juventus. Interestingly enough, too, 89% of Italians were polled and viewed that their government is corrupt, and 64% said there's nothing we can do about it. And also, a former Juventus executive was quoted as saying, "If you're not cheating, you're not trying." So, again, if you want it all, you want a little drama, watch Juventus, watch Italian football, love it all.
Give you a little break, little slide to the right. You see Paul Pogba started his first game in over a year, and
then he got hurt. I know.
I know. I was watching, and I was like, man.
He's one of my favorite of all time, but he's been gone.
Yeah, I wonder if he's thinking. I made that move a couple of years too late for Man U, but who knows? Yeah, I saw it the other day. And then any idea where you think let me see, I might not butcher his last name, Victor Osimhen from Napoli, the striker up top? You have any idea where you think he's going to go? All these transfer rumblings, you think he's going to get a move?
I hope not.
Me neither.
I'd love to see him stay. I love his story. What a great story. And I'm sure Real Madrid, the likes are calling Barcelona, but I hope he stays because I love seeing Napoli back on top and the celebrations. I love that team, and they're again they've a team that have been under some real tough times, and they went into some lower leagues and financial trouble, and I hope they keep it going.
Me too. It wasn't too long ago when they were playing Sorry Ball and SARRI,
right.
Him smoking cigarettes on the sideline and what else, and I think people thought that might have been their modern day peak, but you put some good transfers, some good business.
Yeah,
you never know.
No, they're looking great. I love it.
It's soccer,
Yeah. So at the top, I mentioned that we talk about some of the vocabulary and lingo that the Italians use to describe their game. And again, my old sociology class at UNC Chapel Hill, we used to talk about how language can be a reflection of a culture. Of course, everyone knows that, but it can also kind of bend the culture, as in, the Alaskans have 25 words for snow, Americans have 25 words for money, etc. But it can be a representation. So we'll kind of go through a couple of the cool terms that they use. So bandiera, which technically means flag, and that's a player that has only played for one club their entire career, or at least the majority of their career.
What are some? Let's say I think Maldini, right? He would have been one. Totti, yeah, that's a great one. I remember Del Piero.
Even though Del Piero technically went to Australia, and I think he qualifies.
Sure, those are the ones that come to my head first, anyway.
Well, Zanetti, even though he's not Italian,
yeah.
Again, he may have been in a couple spots, but he's pretty much a lifer and probably one of the most revered at Inter, and. So they use the term, a true gentleman never leaves his lady. So again, it kind of touches on back to that familial loyalty and tribalism and of Italian football. And so they really value, not a year went by that Totti wasn't rumored to be going to Real Madrid. And he's like, no, I'm a Roma lifer.
What's that word again?
Bandiera, which technically means flag. And, the Maldinis to me are like the epitome because they're a triple generation AC Milan. Cesare Maldini, Paolo Maldini, and then his son that's playing now. Of course, Paolo Maldini being the best of the three, but Cesare Maldini was a coach as well. And Maldini was playing for AC Milan when he was 16 all the way till 40. And then, of course, Franco Baresi. Interestingly about Franco Baresi, his brother played for Inter. So it literally, and so Inzaghi's brother, Filippo Inzaghi's brother played for Inter. And they literally, so it's his split siblings in half, which is really cool. Another cool word is colpe di taco, which means back heel. It's a classy skill. They value the colpe di taco. Another one is centro piede, which is center attack. Which is counterattack. The most famous of which being the counterattack against Germany in the World Cup semifinal 2006, which they ultimately won. This is one of my favorite, Cucciao, which is called spoon, and they say it's when everyone knows this. When you do that PK where you fake it like you're going to go left or right, but then you end up just chipping it, lofting it down the middle, and embarrassing the goalie. And so they say, now I'm going to do him a spoon. Now I'm going to give him the spoon. And Totti famously said that when he did that to Van der Sar in the Euro Cup. And Pirlo was famous for doing that as well. a couple times. So yes, that's, use that one at home. Kids say, now I'm gonna do them a spoon.
Kahunas to do that.
Yes.
gotta have the ice in the veins.
Yeah,
as
that's
they say around here.
because if that doesn't work, it goes real bad. Although I have not seen it not work many times, honestly.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Maybe I'll flash up on the screen here because I'm not thinking it, so I'll make myself a little note. But there's another word for it that the Argentinians use that I think most Spanish-speaking countries use. It's escaping me right now. I'm not sure why, but yeah, you gotta be confident in your ability to pull something like that off.
Yeah, you got to have the guts of Totti and Pirlo to pull that off. Pirlo did that against Joe Hart in the Euro 2013 quarterfinals. Another good one is curva, which is the section behind the goal where typically the ultras send. They also call it the curva culta, which is cool. There's a goal alla Del Piero, Alessandro Del Piero has his very own name for a type of goal where you shoot a slider from the bottom left to the top right. He did that so often that they called that the gola al Del Piero, which is really cool.
Paneca. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, what in the world I'm talking about? Yeah, that's the Spanish version.
Yeah. Then there's gol di rapina, which means robbery. Plays into that catenaccio style, which is basically it's sort of like in chess. You play defensively, wait for someone to make a mistake, then you attack. And Filippo Inzaghi was famous for this. He was the quintessential poacher. And that was kind of the perfect. If you had 11 defenders in Inzaghi, all you had to do is wait for them to make a mistake, and then he'd be there to poach. And then, of course, we talked about the libero, which means free, which is typically that they used to call it back then the number 6. That was kind of the sweeper. We think of the number 6 now as more of a defensive center mid. But, Baresi is one, kind of maybe the most famous one that played behind the 4. And just, I guess Cannavaro wasn't technically one, but he sort of played that role.
Kind of a little bit outdated, I would say. I'm just trying to think of any. I mean, you pretty much get a flat 4 almost everywhere you go nowadays.
Yeah.
I'm like really trying to rack my brain here, but I don't think anyone kind of plays that role anymore. If anything, it's the sweeper in front of the back 4, like a Conte or a Makaleli. Yeah. Huh. Interesting. It's just interesting how it kind of transforms over time. You see like some. Pep ball, right? Pep in the Premier League, and then you kind of see the trickle down effect. So it's cool to see kind of the styles ebb and flow.
Yep.
I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm dating myself, but I mean, when I was coming along, teams played with a sweeper, and you played with a couple center mids, maybe 3 on top, but now it's typically 2 on top all the way. And I think 4-4-2 is probably more popular than it's ever been, interestingly. But anyway, then there's maledetta, which means the cursed. They use that to describe a free kick taking style, as in the ball's cursed. And Pirlo is one of the most famous for that, where he would use 3 external toes, stick them out. He practiced them it's basically, and Ronaldo kind of does it too, where you kind of kick it and it rises up real fast and then dips down after it hits the wall.
Yeah, like the knuckling, the swerve.
Yeah.
Kind of the ball doesn't spin, but it kind of just.
And it goes up real fast and then dips down. And so it's called the cursed maledetta.
Look, if you're listening on audio right now, we're doing hand motions of what the ball is doing. So go check out the video version.
Yeah, that's right. Then there's nel sette, which means in the 7, which is their term for upper 90 goal. There's Pacinaro, a bench player, which unfortunately Pulisic is right now. We got a free Pulisic. There's papera, which means duck. And a duck is the most feared animal by the goalkeepers in Italy. And it's as if they make a mistake and duck, that's like the ultimate curse and ultimate mistake by a goalie.
A howler, if you will.
Yes. That's exactly right. Then there's the ciaboletta morbida, which means smooth saber cut, and it's a long in-swinging pass, typically from a defender into the box. It'd be kind of a Beckham, although he wasn't a defender, but certainly Panucci in the right back, Maldini certainly to some extent. And again, Catenaccio does rely on the outside backs to really get forward a lot as well. And so that's kind of a cool one. The smooth saber cut is what they call that pass.
Kind of like an outswinger,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then there's Trecarista, which is the number 10, which is they call the mythological figure, the one that is blessed, the magician. So that's the Totti, the Del Piero, the Baggio, the one, again, they all kind of play defensively, but that's sort of the chosen one that's going to sort of make the magic happen up there on the top. So yeah, now kind of segueing into, the last little bit here is we can't talk about Italy and the world of soccer in Italy without talking about fashion. Never have blue uniforms look so good every time, right? Which they're called the Azzurri. Which, interestingly enough, my son said, "Why do they wear blue? Their flag's not blue." And I said, "That's a great question." So it's actually they're called the Azzurri because of the old Savoy family, the old royal family of Italy is Savoy blue. So they still wear that to this very day. Really interesting. I'm rocking a tie today. I'm trying to do my best Roberto Mancini impression.
Looking sharp.
Thanks, man. I got my Gucci shoes on. I got my Armani tie on. I don't look nearly as good as any of the Italians do, but the coaches never looked cooler. The players look cool. And fashion is an integral part of the game there. I think a really cool story to illustrate that right now is the story of Venezia FC, Venice. As you can see, this jersey right here, which I would say was by far my number one jersey of 2022. And
point it out again. I'm switching the camera. Yep.
So, interestingly enough, Venezia was bankrupt twice in the last 20 years, declared insolvent, and actually an American owner named Duncan Niederbauer, who was the former CEO of the New York Stock Exchange, took ownership of the club. And because he loved Venice, he spent a lot of time there with his family, and he was like, I got to figure out a way to pull this club out of bankruptcy. The stadium only sits 11,500, and what they've done is they've used fashion as a means to make it a global brand. And they ditched their partnership with Nike. Again, we love Nike, but they've went back to the OG brand of Italy, which is Kappa, and have made these incredible jerseys. And their marketing and social media campaign looks more of that of a fashion magazine than that of a football club. And jerseys have never been hotter in the world, and collectors are buying them in droves, and it's literally pulling them out of bankruptcy. And they went from Serie D back to Serie A. I also note, really cool, Greensboro's own Gianluca Busio plays for Venezia.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so does Tanner Tessman.
Yeah,
I believe his name. So they got a couple Americans on there.
Yeah.
Didn't have the best season this particular last season, but just to make the hop from D all the way up to the top, a couple Americans on there too. It's nice to see them.
Yeah, and so Gianluca Busio, I used to go see him play when he was a teenager at Bryant Park in Greensboro, and then he moved to Sporting, to Kansas City. There was no academy program here in North Carolina. Now, of course, now there's Charlotte FC, but it's just cool to see how they've literally used fashion as a means to pull themselves up. And It's also really cool too. The owner, what he said when they got all the way to Serie A, he's like, we don't have the infrastructure for this yet. Like, we're not ready, but they were there nonetheless. And he's really instilled a family atmosphere there. He came in, he said, let me be clear to the players. He said, I work for you. You tell me what you need, I'll give it to you. Also, what's really cool is a lot of the proceeds of the jersey sales go to climate change efforts globally, but also in Venice, which, as we all know, is quite literally underwater right now. And so, I mean, who knows how much longer Venice is even going to be there. I mean, I hate to say it, but like our great-grandkids, there may not be any Venice anymore, which is the coolest city in the world, by the way. It's just unbelievable. There's no other place like it.
Venice, that's the canal boats. And,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
there's no streets.
There's no streets.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's awesome. PSG has kind of followed a similar fashion. They're actually not very. They've never won a Champions League. They're not that successful, but they have used fashion as a means to become a global brand with Air Jordan, and it's certainly the ownership group that is good trillionaires doesn't hurt either. But they've really used fashions as a mean to become a global brand. Signing Messi doesn't hurt either.
Yeah, that'll help.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt. And, just kind of in closing, I know we talked about some of the nastiness of Italy, but I want to just, again, conclude that this is a love letter to Italian soccer. I romanticize those old AC Milan teams, Donadoni and Costa Curta, and, like them or love them or hate them, they've got 4 World Cup wins. They're tied with Germany, right behind Brazil for the most of all time. They've been in 6 finals, 2 Euro Cup championships, 4 finals in the European Cup, 12 Champions League titles of Italian clubs between Juventus, AC Milan, and Inter, 7 times UEFA Cup champs with Milan, Fiorentina, Juve, Lazio, Parma, and Sampdoria. 9-time Europa League champions, of course, Juve again, Inter, Parma, Napoli. 5 players have won the Ballon d'Or. And I don't think anyone would argue with you that they've got the best defenders of all time in, Maldini, Baresi, Chiellini, Costa Curta, Cannavaro, Materazzi, Bonucci, Panucci, Trapattoni, list goes on and
Chiellini,
on. Nesta.
Yep, we're probably forgetting 5 that people are screaming about
dozens,
too. Yeah,
dozens.
absolutely.
Again, I spent a summer in Italy. I grew up loving watching Italian soccer. Anytime Italy's playing, I watch them. Again, I used to bust tables and wash dishes for my 2 buddies, Vinny and Angelo, in Chapel Hill at Ep.3, and they were from Naples, diehard, interestingly enough, they're diehard Juve and AC Milan fans. 2 of my favorite guys in the world, the most hard-working guys in the world, and we would eat pizza, watch soccer, drink espresso. It was great times. They'd pay me in cash. I'd go straight to the bar. But again, this has been a love letter to Catenaccio and a deep dive on Italian soccer. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Please like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening to the audio versions, we got some extra graphics, couple extra things on the YouTube version. Go ahead and comment on the video, guys. Let us know some topics that you'd like to talk about or like us to talk about and chat about. We can take this show in any direction that you guys want to. I'm super excited about this one. You cannot tell the story of soccer without mentioning Italian football.
Yep.
I think that's super integral to the sport as a whole. This was a lot of fun, man, and I guess we'll see him next time, huh?
Yeah, thanks. Like, comment, subscribe, send to 3 Fins that don't know about it. We really appreciate your support. Italians, we love you. We love your hand gestures. We love your complaining to the ref. We love everything about you. Keep being you, and we'll keep tuning in. Thanks.